So, what factors go into government efficiency? It's been a very hot topic recently, well, with Doge and everything. But what really makes government efficient, and how can we kind of see what factors go into this? So, this is going to be a bit different from the previous videos, which have been purely analytical or have been just kind of podcast talks. But this is more of an actual idea I want to propose, and maybe like a study can be based off of this, even though it's already been an idea popularized. So, make sure to stick up to the end of the video to make sure you hear my proposal, and maybe we can get some conversation going off of this. So to introduce this idea, this was born a bit far back, but I think it's more meta now. But this is about the size of a government bureaucracy, at least in liberal democracies, and how general government efficiency can be modeled based on the size of a population or the size of a country in general. So let's get into the birth of the concept. How did I come up with this? So of course, I think America is a objectively great country, right? Despite all of the problems we have here, we've fixed so many problems without the fundamentals of our country changing. And that's what makes America great. We have a constitution and a system set up to change, right? A lot of countries and papers in the past haven't been based around that, but in America, we can change things like slavery, like institutionalized racism, without the makeup of the country coming down. We still have the same system as 200 years ago, but we've changed things and made adaptations. So based on this, I always found it a little bit unfair to Americans, or at least America, when people made the considerable jump in logic of comparing America to Europe. So in Europe, we hear all these great things about the happiness index. We hear about the free healthcare. We hear about the excess amounts of social service, right? And the taxes aren't even that much higher. Of course, you have all these problems with like slow healthcare, but if you're living in a good city in, for example, Finland, you're going to have a much happier life than in America. It's just the fact. Of course, they're going to have huge problems down the line. Check out the overpopulated or underpopulated video. But the fact is, a lot of people love to compare America to Europe. And so that got me thinking, right? Like, obviously, I want to defend America as an American myself, but it became increasingly hard as the statistics don't show it. We don't have the best education, we don't have the best healthcare, we don't have the best XYZ. We're not first in any metric except for like military spending, right? You hear this over and over again. Yet, America is a unique nation with a unique demographic makeup, with all these different problems that we still manage to go on with. So that's when I came up with the idea, right? Whether or not it's true, I think it's an important or interesting hypothesis to consider, is does the size of a nation impact the way it's being run, or does the population density or the population makeup, or does the physical size of a nation matter to whether or not you have a bureaucracy able to actually manage the government very well, and what factors that might have in government efficiency. So obviously that's sort of the birth of the concept is. And watching a video not so long ago, I came across a model called the Kleiber model. So this is a biology term. So obviously metabolism is anything that keeps our life activity going, right? Your digestion, processing food, and getting energy out of food, right? And this is something that all animals must do to stay alive. So you would think that as an animal gets bigger, like a whale or elephant, right? You would think that their metabolic requirements increases, right? They need more stuff to go off of. This is partially true because they need more mass, but their actual metabolic rate is lower. If you're small, you usually have higher relative body temperature. Your metabolism is faster as you're always generating energy, and you're more likely to be fast. In this model on the screen here, you can see that a mouse has very high metabolic rate. But as you start increasing mass, you find that animals like horses, elephants, sheep, these have lower metabolic rates. This means that it's more efficient. The body moves more efficiently compared to the amount of energy it produces. And I thought this would be an interesting comparison to make to the size of countries, right? Maybe if you swap out mass for population or some sort of index that is related to population, maybe you can get some sort of model similar to this. This is, I believe, like 10 to the 3/4 or something is the rate of metabolic increase. But that's where the question comes in with this whole concept I'm trying to explore is, can a country be compared in a similar way where we can get a linear relationship between, or linear or some mathematical relationship between size and efficiency, or the size of the government. And I think this is important to discuss because it can tell us more about how we can fit our government to be more responsive to its larger population and be able to manage all these things. Because obviously, just because you have more resources, maybe doesn't mean you can actually afford to do everything, especially with such like inequality, right? Obviously, America has, orders of magnitude more resources than countries like, Germany, for example, but it also has, a significant amount more people. But the amount of people is, so like the comparatively, America has more people than Germany, or America has more resources than Germany than it has people than Germany. And that means that, theoretically, we should be able to do more for each of our people, but simply our system isn't set up to manage all of that. And I also think that's not only because of the inequality, but also due to inherent problems with managing such a large country. So famously, the Soviets, right? They had a huge empire, probably one of the largest in history. But one of the main problems they came into is that with their structure, with their totalitarian structure, they were unable to actually manage information and send out orders to each of their subsidiary countries, because the information technology at the time was simply not equipped to deal with such things. And so I'm thinking similarly, could there not be a similar correlation with maybe not information technology, but or maybe it is information technology, but we're not well equipped to deal with such a large population. There's not very many countries like America with this size that is working so well. We always say America's so unequal, but if you look at China, which is much bigger, you're gonna find that so much of non-urban China is still rural. It's in dirt poverty, right? Rates that even the poorest Americans don't experience. And when you look at this, America really truly is unique in this fact, and it's also due to our large resources. Still, we have a lot of inequality, but there might be a reason to this, and this is what I'm trying to propose here. And right. So this has a lot of questions involved. So the main hypothesis is what factors go into government efficiency, and does population have a direct influence on the size of the bureaucracy or government efficiency in general? So this isn't a new idea. This has been discussed multiple times in the past by multiple people, and it's an ongoing debate whether or not a population or country size has to go into the size of bureaucracy. So there's proponents for both sides of the argument. Some people say yes, because there's obvious logistical hurdles with managing large populations. Others say it's going to be less, because with a larger population, you can't hire infinite people, therefore you need a more efficient government system that allows for less people working in bureaucracy. But it's been very clear that the bureaucracy is increasing throughout the Western world for at least since the end of the Cold War, right? There's more regulation, more administration than ever before. And it doesn't seem to be getting any more efficient, nor does programs like Doge actually help with efficiency. They just, cut down inefficient parts, but they don't actually help with the efficiency level itself. So cutting out the lard doesn't take away from the fact that the pig's still there, right? So what does this say? What is this trying to say? What am I trying to prove? Well, I'm trying to prove that countries like America need something else or have certain factors that prevent them from becoming as successful as small countries like Liechtenstein or Luxembourg or Switzerland, which are generally, or even Finland, which have smaller populations, which are happier overall in America. The only thing I fear here, as we go into my proposal, is that there's so many controls, methods, and factors that we may need to actually look at. And I'd like to get into some of these and hear some people's thoughts about why or why not some of these factors might matter. So on my document here, I have a few things that might matter. One is financial stability. Over the years, how financially stable has the country been? Have they only been impacted by global recessions like the 2008 one, or has it been very reactive? For example, like a lot of countries in South America have resource economies, as we discussed in the imperialism video, which prevents them from being financially stable, because as resource prices go up and down, the success of their economy fluctuates. Next is corruption. Can their government be even trusted to make the right decisions, or is their government actually efficient, or are they actually making an effort to be efficient? This is most applicable to, like, for example, terrorist nations, terrorist states, at least as America defines them, or certain countries who are in civil war in, for example, Africa, right? Or like even Myanmar. And then we have the inequality index, right? How is wealth distributed? Is the happiness level because of poor wealth distribution? This also matters comparatively, right? For example, wealth distribution is significantly better in Europe than it is in America. At the same time, America has a severely different demographic makeup, and it is larger in general. So, for example, another example is India and China. The wealthiest of the wealthiest, or even the 1%, is extremely high, right? At the same time, you have people in rural China, rural India, who are living without basic modern needs, for example, right? This has been well documented, even though the Chinese government tries to hide these things. And what this shows is that it's rare for a big nation to do so well, because it's really hard to maintain that super efficiency needed to manage such a big country. So I guess if I want to put it in a more simplistic way, is to manage a big country, you probably, this is my hypothesis, right? You probably need a really large bureaucratic state, or you need a really efficient government. And the distinction between the two is that these two are significantly different because of the cost it provides on the government. An efficient government means that you're not going to need a lot of costs, but you have a really good setup. A large bureaucratic state means you need a lot of money going into the bureaucratic state because you need more people managing this. You need middle managers, managers for middle managers, and then you have like local administrators, all of these things that drive up the cost. So I want to explore more of that. So some other factors might be the history of the country, right? Or the demographic makeup, right? Because all of this matters in determining what you need or what a country needs. And this, I fear, is the biggest problem for making a mathematical quantitative model for something like this. However, it's been done before. So we've discussed multiple times in previous videos the concepts produced by either Sapiens, the book, or The Great Wave. And what these books do is they try to take a certain metric, which would be, for example, grain prices throughout Europe in the 1300s for the Great Wave, and make general assumptions about the wage economy of that time using that one metric because it's reflective of the overall economy, right? For example, wheat and grain in general was the main way people interacted with food or market because that's what they produced on their farms. So this is my proposal. I want to do a study using a population of many countries, size of their bureaucracy, and their spending on that, and then model it versus time if possible. So what does this mean? This means that you're going to see a direct relationship between the size of the population and the bureaucracy of the nation, and then do that very same thing, but do the size versus time of each, right? So like time versus population and then time versus bureaucracy, and see how that fits out. Because if I'm right about my basic hypothesis, you're going to find that as population increases with, the Industrial Revolution and such, the government will either increase or decrease. And then looking at modern days, and we can see what programs, what certain outlier countries have, we can make a general distinction about what countries are government efficient and which ones necessitate a bigger bureaucracy. And what I hope to find here is some sort of relationship between the size of the country, size of bureaucracy, and then government efficiency. That way we can make a possibly more educated decision quantitatively on whether or not we need to either make our government more efficient or make it much bigger. And this is such a big problem because there's so many factors, as I said, because even individual societal culture matters with the amount of efficiency you have, or the norm of a big government. For example, China's had thousands of years of history with bureaucracy, and that's why their system sort of works, despite their large size, right? Even though they, of course, have so many problems to deal with, they still have that built into the Chinese system, the psyche of a bureaucratic state. And this has been well documented over history about how different societies function depending on their historical norms. So based on this, I'd like to just sum it up and say, again, we introduced the birth of the concept, which is America versus Europe when it comes to the efficiency of the government and the qualities it has versus the population. Then the Kleiber model, which discusses normally biology, but maybe there's a parallel to population and government size when it comes to how efficient it grows, depending on how this population itself grows. Finally, we made the hypothesis and proposal, which is about whether or not there's a correlation between the population and the bureaucracy, then population, and then the government efficiency, and finally, a model of all of that over time to see how countries evolve based on population growth. So this was a shorter video. I just wanted to get this out there. And if anyone sees this, thank you very much for watching this far in a non-interesting video. But this is a really interesting idea I've really wanted to explore for a long, long time. So please leave a comment if you have anything you want to add, anything I should consider before I get started on this in the next few months. Thank you, and that's been the Rhetoric Reviewed. Out.